Welcome to this session of Alevity's Technology Series Coffee Break. Today, we're going to be talking about Microsoft Teams and some of the new features that we enjoy and think make this a great platform for collaboration and interaction amongst your peers and your business partners and everyone that you work with throughout the day. Introductions. I'm your guest host today for Jeff Dotzler. I'm David Eichkorn, a managed services architect with Alevity. A little background on me. I've been with Alevity for 18 years, and my background is in IT management and strategic planning. Also with us today, special guest, Peter Niebler, who is part of our solutions architect team. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, David.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate that. Likewise.
Yeah.
Well, Peter, why don't we just jump into the conversation? We're here to chat about Teams, and personally, I think this is going to be a fun conversation. I think I use Teams now more than I use Outlook, and Outlook's kind of been that de facto application for years, and I think I monitor Teams now more closely than I do my email. I think just in general, looking back at the last year, Teams has come a long way in its development and how we use it. Curious to think if you agree and where you've seen some of the trends hit within Teams over the last year or so.
Yeah, I think it's kind of obvious with some of the stats I might lay out here with Microsoft that's where the push is in their development, right? So Microsoft with COVID, has really put an effort into running Teams as kind of their flagship product right now. So, a few statistics: over 95 million people joined, were added to Microsoft in 2020. That's that's almost a third of the country, right? There's over 145 million daily active users, and up to which was compared to like 75 million last year. So there's just a huge growth going on in Teams right now, and Microsoft, is putting their development there. They see this as, a win. I think us as users, me personally, sees it as a win too. It's benefited me a lot. You mentioned, Outlook, and there's been that fight, or not that fight, kind of the battle over that single pane of glass. And we've had that in like the admin sections, like how do we monitor all our different security products? How do we keep that all under one roof and keep that organized? But on the app side too, the user side, I think Microsoft Teams is somewhat genius in doing that, right? This is an application hub. There's found a home for it where people go to, where we used to always spend so much time in Outlook. I spend way more time in Teams now, and I can't wait for the time where I can get rid of Outlook and they pull that completely in there. They've done that a little bit with the calendar and some of the other features, but I think that's the direction they're headed in. So kind of a long-winded answer there, but Microsoft is really pushing for this, and I'm seeing it work very well. So in my daily life.
Yeah, great perspective. The revenue growth there, particularly when you see not only the amount of revenue that's increased, but just the daily usage. When you think about 145 million daily active users and the infrastructure that goes into supporting that, and the improvements that Microsoft has had to make to support that volume of activity over the last year. And I think they've done a nice job in maintaining the system. Nothing's perfect. There's going to be blips here and there for various reasons, but when you look at what they've achieved, it's pretty impressive. Just a quick side note, want to let everybody know about the Q&A feature and the chat feature. Feel free to jump in with any questions you have about Teams as we're talking. There is also a poll that I'm going to launch, and if you wouldn't mind answering that question. We're just kind of curious to see how many folks on the call today are actively using Teams. Or if you're not quite there yet and you want to learn more about it, how it might change the way that you interact with your coworkers and do business. So feel free to jump in at any time. And if there's a particular feature that you would like to see or that you haven't seen, please share that with us, because maybe it is a feature and Peter can help guide us to where that is. Or if it's not a feature, we'd love to hear about it. And we can, of course, submit those things to Microsoft on your behalf into their feature request mechanism. So keep an eye on that. Interestingly enough, we got a couple poll results in already. So far, we've got 9 people who have responded to yes, they use Teams, and we have a handful of people who've said they're not quite using it yet, but they want to learn more. So that's exciting. Moving on here, I think from a feature perspective, with everything that has changed in the last year, Microsoft's really been under the gun to roll out features that were in high demand to accommodate that new work from home or remote work concept, where we're not all able to sit in a conference room together anymore. Peter, why don't we talk about some of the features that we have felt as heavy Teams users, because you and I are significantly working with Teams every day. Why don't you share a couple of the features you think that have been released here that have been pretty significant?
Yeah, to me, it all starts over the past year with meetings, right? Teams is so much more. It's thought of as kind of this video conferencing platform, but we all know it's more than that. People are using for IMs, even file storage, third-party application integrations, but meetings has been the big drive over the past years in the new features. One of my favorites there was the breakout rooms. So you and I know we use that both for business purposes, and within the company also some fun things we did at some of our meetings where we were able to break out, if we were playing a game or doing like a work group session or something like that. So breakout rooms is where you have a meeting, say with like 20 people or so, and you need to quick split up into small groups. You can do that privately within Teams and then all come back together, back to the main meeting. So that to me has been one of the best features that was missing there, that some of the other competing products had over Teams. So I know, and I'm going to let you speak to it too. One of the other big ones is being able to do PowerPoint presentations. So, kind of our back and forth here, David, you might want to talk. I know you use that quite a bit.
Yeah, the PowerPoint view mode, as it's called, is relatively new, I think, within the last 45 to 60 days. But what Microsoft did there is, they of course allow you to share your screen, or they allow you to share a PowerPoint deck specifically. But they've added some features there to keep the presenter prominent, so that as you're displaying that PowerPoint, your image from your webcam is not shifted into the area with all the others, where some people may see it, some people may not, depending on how many attendees are in the meeting. It's now prominently displayed with the deck off to the side a little bit, so that you can maintain that eye contact with your audience. I'm doing that right now with my camera out of habit, even though you can't see me. And you can really connect with them in that way that you traditionally haven't been able to in some form of Teams meeting historically. The other features that I like that have been introduced in the PowerPoint presentation view mode is there's annotation tools. There's a laser pointer, there's a highlight tool, there's a lasso select. There's different methods you can use as if you were in a physical conference room, walking up to a whiteboard and grabbing a dry erase marker and circling or making notes or adding text. It really adds another element to the collaboration that can occur during a presentation or a whiteboard session that you're working on with your peers.
Yeah, all those little features are nice, right? Where even just the raise hand, that came out a while ago, it gets used quite a bit. And there's more management features for the organizers, who can keep who muted, who can control what cameras are on, and then the recaps too. So things that with transcription or recordings or chats during the meetings or files shared are all then saved in those meetings. You can even get an attendance of who was there. The way you find those is, after your meeting, you go into the calendar item that was there and open it up, and there's this detailed section up top, and that's generally where most of that stuff is kept. So just a tip on where to find that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, meetings has really been it. It hasn't only been meetings, but that's really where the push has been.
One new feature that I know my team that I work with has started to use as we record our meetings for note-taking purposes. Teams is now doing live captions and displaying that content on screen if the attendee opts to see that, in case there's an audio technical issue or just an auditory issue that the user would prefer to read on the screen. That's been in place for a little while, but what now they've done, and this is kind of getting my geek tendencies here rolling a little bit, they've introduced speaker identification. So now not only is it putting the text up on the screen in real time for captions, it's also annotating as a different speaker starts giving information that live caption is preceded by that person's name, so you know who's speaking. Simple things that really help that feature become more of a natural resource and tool throughout the meeting, but things that I'm sure, from a development standpoint, took a lot of work to roll into. And I think these things are making these tools are making the meeting experience a more natural process for people as we work through this.
Yeah.
So
I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, so I mean, there's really good stuff that has come out even in the last 45, 60 days. And I don't see the steam engine slowing down here on what Microsoft is working on. Sorry,
Yeah.
Peter, go ahead.
No, I put kind of that nerd hat on too. And when I'm seeing those features, I'm like, how are they doing that? But they make it, such a much better experience, those little pieces, Speaking of that, there's some other features in there that I really like as well. First, everybody loves emojis, right? And all the funny GIFs or GIFs. I know some people say it different ways, but I've done a lot of these like what we call CIE training sessions. That's people and go through the whole Microsoft cloud experience with hands-on. And when we get into Teams, the first thing I see people doing is sending, IMs back and forth with one-upping each other with the funniest emojis or GIFs or GIFs. So they keep adding those. I think those are good for, keep your day light, while you're working. And so, more stuff is always being added. Also, you can see the integration starting to happen too. I think Microsoft's long-term view is this is your application hub. You come in here and your OneNote is here, your documents are here, and then you can open up your Word or Excel documents right in there. You might have a connection to your third-party app, and those integrations are going further and further. We mentioned Outlook before. Now you can do your calendar. I used to always be in my calendar in Outlook. I'd say now I'm more of it in Teams. And not everything was there, but for example, you can now set your out of office right there in Teams. So you can, and you have your status there for do not disturb, and you can even set how long you want that do not disturb to go. So all those notification settings, those are all becoming user features that are right there at your fingertips in Teams, and you're not jumping between applications anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about this as you were just talking about that. We use it for instant messaging and video meetings, but what other features, Peter, do you use Teams for? I could talk about how I use it, but tell me how you use Teams beyond some of those core features.
I think the next step that I'm using it for, and I see a lot of companies use it for, they usually start with like IM and meetings, but then they start integrating their files in there. And so being able to have your files on there, it makes the collaboration experience on those files much easier. So, say we're designing a project for a client, we're able to go in there and kind of look at that project plan together and edit it in real time together. That's been a big benefit to us. I think that rather than emailing copies back and forth and not knowing what's the latest copy, it's all right there. And then it's also wrapped around, it's within the corporate environment. These things aren't leaving. So the admins behind the scenes, the security they need to put around it, the backups they need to put around it are all there for them. And the users are still getting a good user experience. The other thing that I've seen people use it for is bringing in some third-party apps. I think that's a little bit slower unless there's a specific need to do that, but it's not hard to do. So let's say you haven't moved your files up. You could connect your Dropbox to there, or your Google Drive up to this and use your files that way. I also like using the Microsoft apps inside of there. Like I mentioned, OneNote, the Word, Excel. So it's not just the documents, but it's also using the apps right there. So I don't have to jump around.
I've just launched another poll, interested in some feedback from everyone. Wondering how you use Teams. So there's a couple different options here. You can vote for multiple items, but we're interested to know, are you using it to share data and do instant messaging and video meetings? Maybe you're just doing instant messaging and Teams meetings only. Is Teams something you use with internal coworkers only, or do you work with people outside your organization? And then finally, are you using Teams to collaborate on Office documents like Peter was describing, where you can have multiple users in working on the same Excel workbook, PowerPoint, Microsoft Word document at the same time? Getting some good results here back. Thank you for the participation. I've got a strong response on using Teams for sharing data, instant messaging, and video meetings. I think for me personally, Peter, I don't know about you, but the ability to store files now in Teams within the respective teams that we belong to, and by that I mean a team in Teams, which also correlates back to the teams that I'm a member of at Alevity. When we store files within Teams and then use the OneDrive application to sync our computers to those folders, for me, it makes it really easy to have access to the data. It sits on my computer just like any other file would. I can open it from a local folder, and when I'm working on it, it's constantly in sync with the team system, and other users can get into it. So I think for us at Alevity, that we've been doing that for a while. That's been a game changer in terms of where we're storing data and how we can collaborate on it with each other. Peter, there's some organizational benefits to that from a security standpoint and just an electronic asset standpoint on how we're safeguarding our data. Can you talk about some of the ways that Teams is able to offer organizations some security and peace of mind when data is stored in the Teams environment?
Sure. Yeah, it's not super awesome often that the user experience being elevated and the admin backside getting better, right? And Teams kind of is merging those two. So the user experience is getting really good inside of Teams, like you were just describing, but then keeping all that data within, the corporate system, Microsoft. Now you got all their tools, right? Whether it's Azure Information Protection or data loss protection, you're still controlling this data, and sharing it out of there. So there's the audit trails for sharing, there's controls for sharing, as opposed to, people just, they got to get their work done. So they take the file and send it the easiest way they can. Now this is probably the easiest way they can, and it's still secure. So, to me, that's a win-win that way, because you're working within the corporate systems that have these systems in place to be able to, keep things secure.
I think one of the, and just a side note, there was a question here about if there's a screen share that we should see, or just the welcome slide. We just have the welcome slide today, just some discussion going on here. So good question. Want to make sure we're not missing anything there. I think from the organization's perspective, to control things like permissions management, document management, data loss prevention, there's some really effective tools there to ensure that proprietary and confidential and potentially even HIPAA and regulated data follows a series of policies and guidelines, and does not slip through any potential cracks where we can introduce risk to the data that we're now storing in an environment that makes it very accessible from a mobile standpoint, work from anywhere, from any device, relatively speaking. One of the things that we do at Alevity is some of the documentation we have is sensitive because it contains information about our core business and proprietary and customer information. We apply document rights management to those files. I think that that's a great feature from Office 365. I don't know that that's Teams specific, but it's a nice partnership up against Teams when we can store data and apply a level of protection that gives our leadership and business owners the sense of security that that data can't fall into hands we don't want it to. Peter, can you give us an overview of what digital rights management is and how that works at a summary level?
Sure. But you're right. Yeah, that's not a team specific feature, right? Teams is giving you the interface to that data. There is a buzzword going on for a while called self-service IT. And this is really people figuring out how to do things in their systems that makes their life and job easy. And that's where Teams kind of comes in and says, no, you can use this. It is easier for you to use, and it will avoid some of that self-service IT. So then you put things in for rights management or data loss prevention, those types of technologies, which really in a nutshell, what that is you're looking at your document, your data, right? Which is mainly your files. You're putting either some kind of label or you're scanning for specific information on it. And then you're putting a policy behind what to do with that. So like HIPAA is a pretty common one. If you have any patient or personal identify information in it, maybe you'll block it from sending email outside the company or something like that. You can't attach that document, or block it from being printed, so it's not sitting on a printer somewhere for everyone to see. So that's really what you're doing, is you're looking at the information in these documents and you're putting policies behind it on what the company wants to happen with that information. So
I bring that up, like we both said, not because it is a Teams feature, because it's adjacent, but I think it's important we put emphasis on the fact that Teams is a great platform to collaborate, to store data, to share data. But we want folks to know that there are significant safeguards available to ensure that the data is protected the same way that it always was when it was on your on-premise server inside your office. In fact, I think the levels of protection are greater than what we've had traditionally in on-premise data storage environments. So lots of levels of protection here to make sure that we can take advantage of that mobility and the access anywhere type feature of Teams. One of the things we didn't talk about with Teams here before we wrap up into some questions, hopefully, just as a reminder, please post those up in the Q&A or chat section, is the mobility factor. I'm a heavy Apple user next to my Windows laptop environment, and Teams is functional for me on my iPad, on my iPhone, on a web browser, on any computer if I'm working remotely, as well as my laptop. And one of the things that I find really helpful is if I'm signed into my PC, I'm at my desk, I'm working away and I've got Teams going, I really don't want my phone going off every time I get a Teams message. Microsoft's done a great job of understanding and knowing you're signed in on your desktop, so don't bombard your mobile devices with notifications. But if I'm away from my desk, Teams notifications do show up on my mobile device. So Peter, I hope that's your experience too. I don't know if you have any experience with platforms other than iOS, but wondered if you had any additional thoughts there.
Yeah, no, that's a great feature to point out. They've improved those notifications. I know we're kind of running low on time, so two of my favorite new features, I'll just point them out. They're small, but I use them all the time, so I really like them. Up in the upper left, there's a back button, and actually, if you hover over it, it'll pull down kind of your recent activity. I use this because I'm jumping between conversations all the time, and I don't like to go find them. So if I go from one to the other, I like to hit the back button, and it's just very handy. I was waiting for that to show up in Teams. The other one I like too is they added that Meet Now button on the calendar, and that's just a quick way. Say you're chatting with somebody, or you can do that in the chat, but you just need to add an ad hoc meeting, right? They got that meeting there. It gets it going right away. You don't have to go through the whole calendar invite thing, and away you go. So 2 features I really like, that back button and the Meet Now.
One, you mentioned being involved in a lot of conversations, and I think we both can attest to having 3 or 4 conversations going on at once sometimes. There's also a nice feature that lets you pop out a chat. If you weren't familiar with that, there's an icon in your chat navigation that lets you create a separate window. So you don't necessarily have to have the full Teams window up to maintain a chat that's going on with you or a group of people. So just it's the little things, I think, that bring that experience in, and when it's easy and simple, it makes the tool that much more effective. Just kind of wrapping up here in the last few minutes. If there are any questions, feel free. We've got a couple minutes left to address those. One question here that's come through from Pete: any plans to pop out separate teams or channels? I'm not aware of any, just chat sessions to pop out. Peter, have you heard anything about that?
I haven't, but Microsoft does keep a good, roadmap for Teams. I can get that URL and throw it in the chat here. But I haven't heard of that. Whenever somebody asks, though, I go straight to the Microsoft roadmap.
Yeah, good. Thank you for posting that. What he's going to post out is a link to Microsoft's page where they talk about features they have rolled out, features that are currently in the process of being rolled out, and the items that are on their roadmap for future development. And it's a great place to keep tabs on what's coming and what's been released. Okay, well, thank you for the questions. Just a couple of quick items to wrap up. We encourage you to register for upcoming events. We have several of them, too many for me to list up here on the screen. So I'm just going to direct you to alevityit.com/events. There you can get a listing of all the items we have coming up. There is a couple of specific ones I'd like to mention. We're really excited about this new workshop we have created, where we're going to be talking about mastering Teams through a couple of different workshops. There are 2 tracks available, one for administrators and the other for power users. Peter, who's on this call, is going to be leading the conversation about administrators, or for administrators, and how they can increase their efficiency and awareness on how to manage and support the Teams environment. One of our other solution architects, Josh Moore, is going to be leading the track on how to help power users get the most out of Teams. So those 2 tracks are coming up at the end of July, 28th and 29th. It's a 2-hour session in the morning on each of those days. Pricing's up on the screen for these 2-hour sessions. And we do have private sessions available if you'd like to create more of a tailored experience specific to your organization. We'd love to hear from you. But we're really excited about these coming up. So definitely give that a peek on our events page. Also, we have our next thought leadership webinar coming up. This is a free webinar where we're going to be talking about Azure virtual desktops. Microsoft is making great strides in the realm of virtual desktops, and we're taking another step towards the elimination of the traditional desktop as we know it. So this is a really exciting conversation coming up on June 29th here at the end of this month in a couple of days. 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, and we've got a little prize there, a virtual drawing that's going to be taking place for a couple of Microsoft Surface earbuds. So get registered for that, get into the drawing, and good luck. Okay, well, wrapping up finally here, for joining the Technology Coffee Break series today, we have a $5 Starbucks gift card for you. If you want to scan that QR code or quickly take a picture of it and then scan it later with your QR reader, you can go get yourself a coffee on a Levity for your next Technology Series break or anytime you'd like to enjoy. I'll leave that up for just a moment here so that you can capture that. Peter, I see you posted that link. Thank you. So if you did not notice the chat that came from Peter, there is a link there to the team's roadmap. Go grab that and bookmark that feature and share it with your colleagues. I think that they'd appreciate that. All right. Well, we are just a minute past the bottom of the hour. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Peter, really appreciate your time. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I liked being the guest host today. I hope to speak with everyone here shortly. Jeff Dolzer will be back in 2 weeks, and we'll talk to you then. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thanks.